Why does it feel like lately you're always exhausted, even after resting? Why does simple tasks feel strangely heavy? And why, no matter how long you lie in bed scrolling or staring at the ceiling, do you still feel drained? It's easy to label that feeling as laziness, a lack of discipline, a motivation problem. But what if it isn't laziness at all? Burnout is not a personality flaw. It's a psychological and physiological stress response that builds over time when chronic pressure outpaces your ability to recover. The World Health Organization classifies burnout as an occupational phenomenon linked to unmanaged chronic stress, and more recent data suggests it's becoming increasingly common. A 2023 report from the American Psychological Association found that nearly 3 in 5 adults reported emotional exhaustion related to work. Gallup's 2024 workplace trends continue to show that a majority of employees report frequent burnout symptoms, not occasionally, but consistently. Burnout doesn't always look dramatic. It doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it just looks like you lying there, unable to care. So how do you tell the difference between laziness and burnout? First, you may feel emotionally disconnected from everything. You show up, you answer messages, you attend meetings, you do what needs to be done, but internally, something feels distant and muted. One of the hallmark components of burnout is depersonalization, a sense of emotional detachment from your work, relationships, or even yourself. It can feel like watching your own life from the outside. You may not feel joy, but you also don't feel much sadness. It's more like a flat neutrality. Research consistently identifies emotional exhaustion and depersonalization as core dimensions of burnout. When your stress response has been activated for too long, your brain sometimes protects you by dulling emotional intensity. Laziness doesn't create emotional numbness, burnout does. Second, you used to be motivated, and now you're not. Laziness tends to be stable over time. It doesn't suddenly appear after years of drive. If you were once proactive, ambitious, organized, or high-achieving, and now struggle to complete even basic tasks, that shift matters. Burnout often hits high performers especially hard. Studies show that highly conscientious individuals are more vulnerable because they push through stress signals longer than others. You may remember a version of yourself who thrived on goals and deadlines. Now, even small responsibilities feel overwhelming. That's not a character flaw, that's depletion. Third, things you once loved feel like a burden. Burnout doesn't just drain energy, it drains enjoyment. Psychologists refer to this as anhedonia, a reduced ability to feel pleasure. While often associated with depression, it also appears in chronic stress states. Maybe you used to love your work, your creative projects, your workouts, or your hobbies. Now they feel heavy, irritating, or even resentful. When you overextend yourself for too long, especially in something meaningful, the very thing you once cared about can become associated with pressure and exhaustion. Laziness avoids effort. Burnout resents what it once cared about because it gave too much. Fourth, you've become more irritable than usual. Small things set you off. Your patience feels thinner. Chronic stress alters your emotional tolerance window. When you're constantly activated, your emotional threshold lowers. A 2022 study in Frontiers in Psychology linked prolonged occupational stress with increased emotional reactivity and reduced impulse control. In other words, when you're burnt out, regulating emotions becomes harder. You may feel embarrassed about how reactive you've become, but irritability is often a sign that your internal resources are depleted. Laziness typically comes with indifference. Burnout often comes with tension. Fifth, your self-care has quietly deteriorated. Burnout shows up in subtle behavioral shifts. You skip workouts, you stop cooking balanced meals, your sleep becomes irregular, either too much or too little. You withdraw socially, not because you don't care, but because you don't have the energy. The American Psychological Association reports that chronic stress significantly disrupts sleep, appetite regulation, and immune functioning. If you've stopped doing things that once felt manageable, grooming, organizing, reaching out to friends, it's not necessarily laziness, it may be your body signaling exhaustion. Sixth, you've become more cynical or hopeless. Another dimension of burnout is reduced sense of efficacy, the belief that your efforts matter. You may catch yourself thinking, "What's the point?" or "It won't make a difference." A 2023 Gallup report found that employees experiencing burnout were significantly more likely to feel disengaged and pessimistic about their impact. This creeping cynicism often develops when sustained effort hasn't led to relief. Laziness doesn't usually come with hopelessness. Burnout does. Seventh, you rest doesn't restore you the way it used to. A weekend off doesn't fix it. A vacation helps temporarily, but the exhaustion returns quickly. Burnout is not just tiredness, it's stress system dysregulation. Prolonged cortisol activation can interfere with energy cycles, meaning your body struggles to reset. If you sleep more but still wake up exhausted, or take breaks that don't bring relief, that's a signal. Recovery from burnout requires more than rest. It often requires addressing chronic stressors and rebuilding boundaries. Finally, the change was gradual. Burnout rarely appears overnight. Researchers describe it as a process that unfolds in stages. Early on, you may feel enthusiastic but pressured. Then stress increases, motivation declines, emotional distance grows. By advanced stages, symptoms may resemble anxiety or depression. A 2024 occupational health review emphasized that recognizing early warning signs significantly improves recovery outcomes. The difficulty is that most people dismiss those early signals as just a rough patch. Burnout builds slowly, which makes it easy to overlook. Calling burnout laziness adds shame to an already overwhelmed nervous system. Laziness implies unwillingness. Burnout reflects inability due to depletion. When your brain and body have been in survival mode for too long, they don't need criticism, they need recalibration. If you recognize yourself in these signs, it doesn't mean you're broken. It may simply mean you've been carrying too much for too long. Burnout overlaps with anxiety and depression, so if your exhaustion feels persistent or your detachment is interfering with daily life, consider reaching out to a licensed mental health professional. You're not lazy. You're exhausted in a way that deserves understanding, not judgment. If this resonated with you, hit the subscribe button and feel free to share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment with your experience. We'll see you in the next video.